Welcome back, wannabes and creators, to another episode of The Complete Creative, the podcast that helps you build and sustain a better creative business. And today on the show, we have Jane Friedman. Jane is a publishing industry guru and expert, and she has been in the trenches for over a decade, helping publishers, writers, editors, and much more build their writing career and stay on top of industry trends through her work at janefriedman.com. So we talk a lot about building a writing career in this episode. And if you are looking to start or build your own writing career, I have a free course all about how to write a great novel at thecompletecreative.com/novel. It's over 4 hours of all of the best tips, tricks, hacks, and advice that I can give you about building a great novel that will sell. And it's absolutely free over at thecompletecreative.com/novel. All right, now that that's done, let's get on with the show. Take it away, Jane. Tell us what you're passionate about these days.
Right now, I've been putting a lot of time and energy into the newsletter that I run, the Hot Sheet. So this is a newsletter that reports on news and trends in the publishing industry. So, going back to the days when I worked at Writer's Digest, I've always been interested in how the industry is developing, especially on the more digital innovation side. And so that's kind of translated into this newsletter that I do, where every 2 weeks or so I'm digging into and reporting on the newest things that are happening, mostly in the US, but I do look at worldwide developments too.
This must be a very interesting time then for you to be doing your show, your newsletter.
Yes, yes. So in the time of the virus, there's an explosion of news about how this affects every single corner of every industry right now. And in publishing, there are so many different angles to the challenge that we're all facing. So, bookstores are affected, of course. Publishers are affected. Digital sales are ramping way, way up. There are authors and freelancers who are worried about their income drying up. And of course, there's also the supply chain issues with the book printers and the distributors and the warehousers all, kind of under threat.
Yeah, it's been quite a month. I was just on right before this, I popped on to a lecture at Ithaca where I was talking about moving this convention that I did virtually and how to do virtual sales and how to work with shops when they are semi to very resistant of digital.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. Independent bookstores in particular have had to pivot very quickly. Their usual stance is, bricks and mortar bookstores are a treasure and they're a community hub and, don't order online, don't go to Amazon. Many of them don't have online storefronts. So they've had to dramatically rethink that strategy now.
Yeah, I've been, so I ran this virtual conference last month, and the big thing that I was missing, I think, is that community feel. As I think that virtual is very good at doing lectures or delivering content or maybe doing very small group of a couple of people talking out and having a drink online. But when you're talking about doing that, maintaining that community feel, I still don't know how to replicate that in a good way online.
Yeah, it takes a lot of, I think, experience, a little bit of talent at being expressive online, but a lot of it's really practice. I mean, it's never going to be the same as being at an in-person event, but there are many things that you can do to get people comfortable and to encourage engagement. And I think authors themselves, as they replace on the in-person book signings and events, as they replace those with more online-driven events, at least for the next couple months, I think authors are going to start to learn some of the best practices and tips and tricks to making these things worthwhile and engaging.
Yeah, what I really have enjoyed about watching this, not that I've enjoyed anything, but one of the things that as a business person who also owns a Verizon dealership and has tried to do B2B and like these Zoom calls for years and it failed because nobody wants to adopt like a new
Mm,
way to do business or to watch things or to look at things is to watch the adoption rate of people from all over the spectrum, embracing, because they have no other option,
right.
digital or Zoom or at some level connection on across the internet, because there's no other choice for them right now.
Right. Right. And I think it's going to end up having some positive effects. I mean, for myself, it's very much business as usual because my business is online to begin with. I've been teaching online education since 2008, 2009. So this is not this. I'm watching everyone else kind of now get on the boat with me. But it it's actually given me an opportunity to give back to some of the people in my community and teach them how to get up and running with online education so that they're not kind of left behind.
Yeah, it's been an interesting time, but I want to make sure that this is relevant to, not just the time that we live in now, but to has some sort of timeless qualities. So what I thought I would do is topic very near and dear to my heart is building a business as a writer and thinking of yourself as a business. So when I saw that your latest book from a couple of years ago was The Business of Being a Writer, I I kind of swooned at the book,
Mhm.
because it's something that I think is sorely lacking, but it's something that has become more accepted as time goes on. So I thought that I could use that as a basis for our conversation today.
Sure. Yeah, part of the inspiration for writing that book was going to one too many conferences and hearing people say, "No one told me that I wouldn't earn a living at doing this," or "Why didn't I realize that getting into debt for a writing degree was a bad idea?" So that was part of why I wrote that book.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody yesterday, and I was saying that, like, I've been doing lectures on this exact topic, making a living as a creative, since 2011, and every time I would do it, people would say, "Why didn't anyone tell me this when I was in college?" And I was like, I
Right.
don't know. That's a great question. I don't know why you didn't take business courses in college, or why they didn't put you, like, make something to not just tell you how to do the creative part of it, but to do
Mhm.
the part that's going to control your life, which is the business part of it.
Yeah, I think there are probably a couple factors that lead into the unknowing, or the ignorance, or however you want to describe it. I think professors and teachers in writing programs, they themselves may not really know what's involved, and they may feel like the students aren't there to learn business. They're there to learn about art and technique and craft, and to do something that's more along the lines of a liberal arts education, and then this it's up to the students later on to connect the dots in whatever way makes sense for their future. um, and then I think part of it is also, just the mythology of writing and artists. This idea that if you bring together art and business, you're somehow staining the whole endeavor, which I don't believe. It's just something that we kind of learn. You don't want to lower yourself or lower your art and get dirty in the business side. But of course, if you do want a livelihood from it, you have to quickly get up to speed on what that requires.
Absolutely. If people told me that 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 like most of my life would be roadieing books from one show to another when I was like doing this full time, I would have planned better. I may have done some more like work at the gym or something, so that I could like so that I could be prepared that I would be warehousing and storing and talking about supply chain logistics way more than I have any that I had any prior knowledge of that I would be doing before I
Mm,
started.
indeed.
I think that I'm gonna just start and kind of try and go through this section by section a little bit, and pull out some of my favorite topics that I
Mhm.
saw. Just which I think the part one, you talk about making a living as a writer. Before we do that, though, I think it would be nice. People say that I don't introduce the guests enough and like let them introduce themselves and talk about their careers. So I thought before we got started with all of that, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your journey, and then we'll get into the meat of this.
Sure. So I was born under a bit of a lucky star in that my career has been solely focused on the writing and publishing industry. When I went to school, I was focused on writing and English lit courses and all of that from the start. I did the whole school newspaper, school yearbook, school literary journal, like all of that through high school and college. And then while I was still an undergraduate, I got a paid internship at a book publishing company. So I went straight from college into a paid publishing job and I stayed there for 12 years. And then when I left, I went into a university teaching job that was teaching writers. And then I went into another publishing job and then I went full-time freelance in 2014. And so it's been just kind of very steady, methodical, linear career growth. Not that there weren't ups and downs, that there were, but when you look at it all together, most people are like, wow, that's really focused and consistent. And how did you do that? And some of it was just having a very stable life. And part of it was intentional, of course. That's just where my interest lied.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting to see how no two people's careers are the same. Some people have a very linear path like yours, and some people look more like they just emptied their junk drawer on a career and
Right.
then somehow figured it out along the way.
Yeah.
So I think the first question of your book, can you make a living as a writer? I think that's probably the best one to dispel first, just quickly. I already know the answer to this question, but could you talk a little bit about that so we can get to what I think my favorite part of part one was?
Okay. So, making a living as a writer, it's rarely about book sales. I mean, eventually it can be about book sales, and one hopes if you're focused on writing books that you will reach that point. But it's pretty rare, at least in an early career, to make a living off of sales alone. So you have to think about all of the different ways that you might be earning money as a writer. And there are so many different potential income streams, which I imagine we're going to touch on some of those. So I think one of the first things I try to do in that book is just make it clear that it's not wise to depend on book publishing advances, or if you're self-publishing, to depend on book sales, at least when, say, you've only got one book or two books, even three books. It takes a long time to ramp up, and it also takes an ability to be producing material. So, in other words, I see a fair number, especially coming from, let's say, the MFA side of the industry, people who are in these more traditional creative writing programs. They might see their favorite best-selling literary authors producing maybe one book every 3, 5, or even 10 years and say, well, they seem to be making a living. And it may appear that way, and maybe they do, but there are probably other factors. They might have um, an inheritance, a rich spouse. They might live in a place that doesn't have a high cost of living. There are all sorts of factors that affect at what pace you can write and if that is going to give you a living. So I just try to be really honest about, the fact that publishers aren't often paying authors enough to write books, and then have that, even at a $20,000 a year level, even that's kind of ambitious when you're starting out.
Absolutely. Yeah, I often think about Kurt Vonnegut being a college professor for his entire career, even though he put out a voluminous amount of books.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
or T.S. Eliot being a banker for his entire career, even though people kept telling him he should go full time as a writer.
Yes. Yes. Day jobs are so prevalent. And of course, teaching is, I don't know if it's the top occupation of writers, but it's definitely very close to the top.
Yeah, I mean, even Brandon Sanderson, who is the most iconic probably living fantasy author, he is still, until at least a couple of years ago, I don't know if he still does, was a teacher at BYU.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I think that Yeah, and on the living cheaply side, I know someone like Craig Martell who makes a very good living as an independent author, lives in Alaska.
Hmm.
So there's all sorts of factors. Like I happen to live in Los Angeles, which means that I have to produce quite a few more books and do a few, make just a slight bit more money than like Craig Martell does to survive, like as like
Yes.
that same level. But I love that you said that like where you live is a factor and how much you produce is a factor as well.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And even someone like James Patterson is producing multiple books, many books a year. And anyway, so yes, and I like that you talked about the art of building a career too, a little bit. But I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about sort of how you think about building your career at the beginning. You have book sales as one bucket of things you're trying to do as a writer, but what are
Mhm.
some of the other things you should think about when you're starting to build your career?
Well, very early in the book, I talk about this concept of lead generation, which isn't terribly well known in creative writing programs. But if you're in marketing and business, it's a very well known idea. And it basically just means what are you putting out into the world that's going to help draw opportunities, hopefully paid opportunities your way and make you more visible over time. So, for instance, you might be blogging, or you might have a Twitter account that's very witty, or you might be putting poems on Instagram, as Rupi Kaur did starting back in 2012 or 2013. Often, lead generation, we're talking about things that you're putting out into the world at no charge. Like it's just for anyone to enjoy, and people discover these gems and then they get more interested and they somehow follow you. It could be they follow you on social media, or they sign up for your email newsletter, or they, in fact, buy a book if you have a book available. So I try to encourage writers to think about what are some of the methods of lead generation that are sustainable for you over many, many years, because it takes repetition and consistency, takes time to develop this, for lack of a better word, brand, which I know some writers do not like being boiled down to a brand, but that's kind of what we're talking about, developing an expectation for the sort of work you produce, what people can expect to see from you next. So when you're engaging in these lead generation strategies for long periods of time, you just become more well known. Your name becomes associated with a certain type of work, and it means that editors or agents or people who have gigs will think, I should really reach out to Russell. I know that he's doing these types of stories and he might have something for my anthology, or I wonder if he'd want to come in on this series, or, and so on. So I think a lot of writers get so focused on the book format. I'm going to write books and they have to be this long, and this is what a proper writer does, that they kind of discard or dismiss some of the innovative tools and platforms that are available, not just to distribute and make your work available for free, but also to eventually charge. So Patreon would be the classic example of that.
I love that because it's stuff I didn't think about until I started editing my own anthologies and how I started thinking um about how I found people or how I reached out to people, because there were people that would just submit to my anthologies, but then I would also reach out to people as well. From maybe I had seen their web comic, or maybe I
Hmm.
had seen something of theirs on Instagram, or
Hmm.
maybe I had walked past their booth at a show and just chatted with them. There's a wonderful artist named Kelsey Jo Silva who I had known for years, and I bought a pin from her, and I'd seen her at some shows, and we'd become Facebook friends. And I'd always wanted her to do a piece for one of our anthologies, and I finally saw her uh, while our submission period was open. I think it was maybe at Denver last year or 2 years ago, and was like, "Will
Hmm.
you please submit, because like I've really wanted to like have you in this book." And she had no idea, and sometimes you have no idea like where those spindles are going to
Hmm.
come back or what's going to come back from them.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
So, I would like to talk about something about your author platform that you do and I do and can help you do lead gen. But for some reason there is this perception about among authors that newsletters are dead. And I don't, can we talk about like do you know why everyone says that? Because I don't understand. Like my newsletter is the like most profitable part of my whole business.
Right. Yeah, I think it comes from a couple places. One is that there are all these softwares out there that have replaced email to some extent for casual communication. So, IM or chat or WhatsApp or even Slack for work, for example. And so people like to say email is dead because we're not using it to write letters to each other, I guess. And then there are some who say email is dead just because younger people don't seem to be adopting it. But I think that's because they haven't gotten into a job yet. And once you get to a certain age, email becomes something of a requirement. Like there's so many things you can't do without having an email address, and including like filing your taxes. I think like there's some things that are just super hard unless you've got an email address. Um, so I don't think email is going anywhere. And yes, it's fallen out of favor for certain types of communication, but marketing is not one of them. Marketing is still uh, very much depends on email, and it's really a safety measure for anybody who wants to directly reach their readers and knows how ever shifting social media can be. So, if you go back to, I don't know, 2012 or thereabouts, there were so many people building up a Facebook presence and they had really great reach. And then it all went off a cliff over a series of years as Facebook pulled it back and made it necessary to advertise. Well, speaking for myself, I'm so glad that early on I believed in the power of email and I offered people the chance to subscribe to my blog posts and also original content newsletter. And it just meant that I didn't have to worry if my, Facebook or Twitter reach dwindled to nothing because I had already captured those people. I hate to use the word capture as if, they were sheep or something or, but, I can reach those people directly, and not have to worry about, oh my God, do I have to run another ad campaign? Even though these people already said they want to hear from me.
Well, it's not even that. I remember I was literally just taking a course that must be a couple of years old, and they were talking about chatbots. And I was like, oh,
Mm.
yeah, I remember when everyone was going on about chatbots. And then suddenly they couldn't use them without paying a huge
Right.
amount of money. And that
Exactly.
was like last year.
Yeah. Yeah. That I think that, and that's just shows the beauty of email. Like, I mean, you do have to pay for it once your list gets to be a certain size, but it's kind of like the social contract with that doesn't change every 3 months. It's just very reliable.
Yeah, one thing that I like about email is that people still value it as a thing that like has a monetary value to it. I don't think people care about liking a page or following someone's Twitter or like people seem to do that willy-nilly, but they are quite a bit more reticent to give out their email address
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
as such when they do give out their email address, there's a higher value that they place on that exchange than other exchanges.
Yes, totally agree. Yes, when people give you their email address, there's a commitment there. There's some loyalty, I think.
Yeah, and on top of that, so I send one email a week, roughly. Sometimes when I'm in a lunch, I send more, but uh, I ask my friends to please send me an email when they have something like that they're launching, or if they have a
Mhm.
web comic or a web novel that they are working on, because I just will miss it in their newsfeed, and then I'll be 3 weeks behind, and then I'm just like, I'm not going to catch up now. Like I was
Right.
caught up, and there's this I for me the idea is like I want my email list to be things that I actually want to check out and enjoy. So promotions that websites that I like are running. Like that is where I'm actually usually taking action. and I'm
Mhm.
actually like clicking those links. So I'm not replying to Target when I'm clicking on a link to go get 25% off at their store, but I am doing what like Target would rather me do, which is go to their website and buy. And I think
Mhm.
part of it is this idea that like because there's not this engagement, there's not nearly as much replying or liking or commenting, that because of that, uh the email is not valuable.
Right. Yes.
Which I found, I run a lot of Facebook ads, and for some reason I have found the people, when I run conversion ads, there's much less engagement than when I run engagement ads, because the people that are converting are not the same as the people that are engaging. And for me,
Mhm.
I would rather be targeting the people that are ready to convert at that time.
Agreed.
So, uh, moving along, I think that we talked a little bit about our author platform. I would like to dig in a little bit more. So, I'm assuming that we can agree that a newsletter is an important part of the author platform.
Mhm.
What other stuff do you think are the essential components of building an author platform?
I usually talk about marketing or author platform having this three-legged stool construction. One leg is your website, another leg is the email newsletter, and the third leg is wherever you're engaging consistently. Like it could be Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, a message board, something where you're popping up reliably. So those three things tend to reinforce one another over time. The email newsletter can help engagement on social and vice versa. And your website just serves as a clearinghouse for everything. And it's also the official story of what you do. And it's a way for people to contact you privately. So those three things to me are, I wouldn't say they're non-negotiable, but boy, you would be making your life hard if you decided to opt out of one of those legs. You would just not have a very sturdy stool. Um, I also think that the hidden part of this is the relationships that you have in the writing and publishing community or in your own professional community, if it's important, like in the nonfiction world, that can be quite critical. So I don't want to say that it boils down to who you know, but certainly your life can be easier if you know a few people who can give you a lift or be supportive, spread the word. We all want to have that Oprah like figure in our career, someone who can say this, hey, this is the book that you need to be looking at or paying attention to, or you need to support this writer and subscribe to their Patreon. It's really hard to toot the horn yourself over and over and over. It's nice to be part of a supportive community.
Absolutely. Well, I think that comes down to the difference between a network and a fan base.
Mhm.
And I think um, authors too often, or any creative really, like commingles the two and assumes that like the people that they're really selling to is the network that they're selling to, instead of having those two things separated. And I think that it's really important to have a robust both pieces
Mhm.
of that.
Mhm.
But the network can certainly do a lot more with a lot less people in it than your fan base can.
Yes. Yes, I like that you distinguish the two because authors probably ought to be talking quite differently to the peers or colleagues or industry, however you want to think about it, the network, versus the fans, the people who are avidly waiting for your next book and are looking for exclusivity and access and what you had for breakfast, those sorts of bits of information.
Absolutely. I mean, I like to. I think about like the fan base are the ones that buy your work, and sometimes the creators are also in the fan base. Like there are agents and editors and publishers and people that buy my books also. But the network is the one I'm trying to like work with on strategic partnerships and such,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
like having anthologies and work with on distribution and all of those things. And then the fan base are the ones who like are looking, like you said, about like what I ate for breakfast and like what the next book is about, and they want to dig deep on like this one character and like get all
Hmm.
of the nitty gritty on them. So I think I agree. It's really important that you talk about them separately, but also that uh, it feels like a lot of authors when they start their career are just trying to get more of their network, and they're trying to go broad but not deep
Hmm.
on their network. So instead
Yeah.
of cultivating 100 or 200 really excellent contacts. They're like, I've got 5,000 friends on social media on
Mhm.
Facebook. So that is that means I have 5,000 people I can reach out to. But really, that might mean something with the audience side, but not the network side.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you a little bit later in the book, you talk about turning attention into sales. And this feels like every time I talk to somebody or every time I'm on a podcast, I am the one talking about how to take your audience and actually like monetize them, because
Yes.
what we get is a lot of people talking about make a big audience, like have 50 people, like have 50,000 people on your email list and all of these, like get a huge Facebook following, but then they don't actually talk about why that like how to take that following and
Right.
move it into sales. So I would
Yes.
love it if you could be the one talking about that for a little bit.
Sure. So to pull out some more marketing terminology, you hear about something called the funnel. So, if you've ever seen the movie or play Glengarry Glen Ross, which I may mention this in the book, I can't recall. He has this chalkboard where he's, giving the speech to the failing salespeople, and he says AIDA, attention, interest, decision, action. And he's talking about how they all need to become closers to move people down to the action line. And that's a form of a funnel. He's got those gold leads that he refuses to give to the salespeople because they would be wasted on on the losers in the room. So, if to try and take that over to the writing community, you've got these leads, which they might be people in your Facebook group, they might be on your email newsletter list. That makes them more of a gold lead. They might be people who, I don't know, follow you on BookBub. There are lots of as you get more advanced in your career, you start to see the differences in quality and value from these different leads. And so then you have to figure out what's going to work best for you to take people from where they're at now down to the end of the funnel where they're actually buying a book, being a patron, buying a service, whatever it is that you want them to do. And you may have several things that you want them to do, but you don't want to ask people to do all those things at once. And you don't want to make the ask so big that they get scared and run away. So usually there are different levels of commitment as you go down the funnel. And as you get toward the end of the funnel, more and more people drop off. That's just how it works. There's some people who will only be able to accept what you offer for free. Maybe they don't have money, or they don't have the interest, or they don't have the time. There are other people who are going to be more committed and more loyal, and they'll go with you another step and another step after that. And then there's the really, really enthusiastic fans who will follow you to the end of the earth, who will buy the $100 deluxe box set, whatever it is that you're offering that's on the most premium end. They're going to be with you at the very, very end of the funnel and hoping that you stretch the funnel out even more. So when I talk about authors diversifying and strengthening both their business model and their income, I always try to, look at what are some other endpoints might there be that you're not yet taking advantage of. Like maybe you have a 99-cent ebook that you've done really well with getting people to commit at that level, but maybe you haven't really tapped out the people who are more devoted to you, who would be willing to do the deluxe box set, or they would be willing to support you on Patreon for $20 a month just because they love you that much, even though they're not necessarily getting all that much in return. They just want to be there and have their name listed as a supporter. So part of this, I think, is limited only by your imagination, but I should probably go back to the beginning and say, whatever you do in this regard, building the funnel and creating these endpoints, it has to feel authentic to who you are, the sort of work you're producing. It has to feel sustainable. You shouldn't feel like this smarmy shill who's trying to take advantage uh, of these people who don't know any better. That is not at all what I'm saying. We're really talking about people who genuinely enjoy what you're doing, and you're trying to offer them something that's worth their time.
What I find the hardest thing for people to do is actually know who that person is, who they're talking to, and really develop that person really well so they know what they want and need. and then develop something like with them in mind for those for products that they might want. Do you find that as well in your own talking with writers?
Definitely in the early stages, I see some serious issues with people not knowing who their readers are. They don't have a strong idea of audience. I think that usually happens just because maybe you haven't produced much work yet, or you haven't been out there engaging with readers much. Like maybe you're not going to events, or you're not having signings, or you're not on social, or you don't have an email newsletter. Like you've cut off all of the potential inputs for readers to communicate with you, or you're just not listening or making yourself available, or it's just too soon for you to get any insight. So the longer you go, though, and the more you produce, I think it becomes almost impossible not to form an idea of who it is that you're reaching. Because, you start to, at the very least, get reader mail. You start to see who you're appealing to. You start to, if you can't resist, reading all of the Goodreads reviews and seeing who it is that's been really engaged by this in a very positive or a very negative way. Um, and this even happens, the negative stuff can also be very insightful if you have a tough skin. Like for the business of being a writer, I realized very quickly that there was a sector of people who were going to really hate that book. And that helps me know who to avoid in my marketing, and also to make it clear for those people in the marketing materials, hey, this book is not for you. Don't buy it. Don't review it. Just ignore it.
Yeah, it's probably I can imagine. I can literally imagine the reviews because I get similar reviews of the book, and whenever it's a 1 star, it's for or a 3 star even, it's for the exact same reason
Yeah.
of like destroying the magic of books or something, or commodifying it, or making it like
Right.
feel like. Uh, so yeah, I think that's important. And also, most importantly, you'll see like as you're launching books, like which ones do well and which ones don't, and that's a
Mhm.
pretty good indication of like, oh, maybe my audience doesn't want me to write like a dystopian sci-fi book.
Mm.
Maybe they want me to return to the thing. And like just by launching books, you'll kind of see what
Yes.
your audience likes and doesn't like too.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
so uh, I really want to talk to you about memberships because I'm launching one soon, and I have but I want to talk to you about one thing first, which is you talk next after that about the basics of book launches. And I was wondering, what do you think is essential to have for a book launch? Like, what pieces are essential to have before you go out and launch, let's say, a first in series book?
I'll go back to the three-legged stool. Like you definitely got to have that author website, an email newsletter, and a social account. And they need to be tied all in together and mentioned in the book. And you want that book to talk about the fact you have this website and email newsletter, and that you can be reached at such and such social account. Because once the book starts selling, if it really takes off, you want to have those things in place from day one or day zero. So let's assume you've got that foundation there. Then it's really hard sometimes to advise about this because you have forking paths. Self published authors manage book launches, I think, in a very different way from a traditionally published author. It's almost like two different industries in some way as far as how you push the sales. And it's because traditional publishers are still relying so much on the print editions and bookstore sales. So a traditionally published author has to think about getting in with the gatekeepers, essentially, like the bookstores and the libraries, and working that sector. The self published author is normally much more focused on the online sale on Amazon. They're thinking about discounts and promos that might happen over even the first year of the book and how those are going to be timed, what they what sort of advertising campaigns they're going to have on Amazon or BookBub or any number of the email newsletters that are out there that promote books. So I find that it's even different skill sets. I think the traditional publishing book launch is far more network oriented, where you're looking towards people in the community, other authors, to help spread the word. And I find that, of course, that can be true in the self-publishing community as well, and within your genre, especially in romance or women's fiction. Still, though, there is such a huge reliance for indie authors on Amazon ads and discounting and price promotions that, if you don't know what those things are and the timing, you're going to be at a disadvantage.
I love that you said that because I know a lot of people looking for a one size fits all a message for how to launch a book, but it's important to know what the book's going to end up in at the end, and then work backwards from there, kind of
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, I want to talk about what you have coming up, but I'm launching this membership site, or I think I'm launching it, and I'm freaking out about like how I can make sure that it doesn't like I don't get three people in it, and that I'm stuck
Oh.
doing like promo for three people instead of like a bunch of people. So you do talk in the section 28 about membership subscriptions and paywalls, and I would love to know like what I should make sure that I have in a subscription or a membership before I launch it to make sure that it doesn't fall flat on its face.
Well, this is an ever evolving area, and I can't say that I have all the answers, but I do think both subscriptions and memberships are a very different way of thinking for most authors. And by that I mean when authors sell books, whether you're traditional or self-published, it's just a one-time thing. People are ponying up the $5 or $20, whatever it is, and then it's a done transaction. Memberships and subscriptions obviously is something that's recurring, and so you're continually having to prove your value in some way every month or every year, depending. And a lot here depends on people's familiarity already with who you are and what you provide. And I think it's really hard, of course, to build a membership or subscription program early career. I think it tends to come intermediate, advanced career level when you've already got some sort of semblance of a fan base and people who have read, probably at least two or three of your books, if not more. So those are the people who are going to be the best targets for a program. I think the number one thing to nail after that is what is it that you're offering them that is going to give them that value that keeps them relatively happy to keep handing over the $1 or $5 a month or $20 a month that you're asking for. Now, the caveat here is that some people are happy to keep paying that even if you offer them nothing because they're just that big of a fan and they just want to be raising their hand in support of you. So you want to make it easy for people to do that. And the tiers here, they're going to be a little different for every author depending on, the qualities of the audience. But you always want to have like that really frictionless $1 to $5 level where it doesn't take a whole lot of like scrutiny to say, yeah, I can handle the $1 a month or the $5 a month. And I don't think you have to offer those people much of anything other than a little bit of access, like to the community or to something that they didn't have before, like special updates or exclusivity to something that's coming up. What you would probably ordinarily already do for some set of fans, but that's just a step up. And then this totally depends on the writer's ability to sustain it, but I see a lot of success with offering shorts and other pieces of writing that go first to the patrons or to the members. It could be on a monthly basis, it could be quarterly, and then that material then gets, usually what I see, it usually gets more formally published for everyone else afterward. So what you're essentially doing is giving your members or patrons the first look and the first chance at reading your stuff. Now, there are ways to complicate this. You can add in like merchandising and more personal interactions. You can put a gate on some content that maybe you didn't before. Although I think that can be hard to do when people are accustomed to getting something for free. You could think about having a value add. So for instance, for this podcast, let's say currently you don't do a transcript. Maybe members or patrons of it start getting the transcript. Or maybe you have outtakes or you have freebies or something associated with the podcast that are only available to members. Or you only make episodes of the podcast available, the last 5 episodes available, but if you want to go back into the whole archive, you have to be a patron. So there are ways to have like what I would call a more positive paywall. Positive being you're not penalizing people or taking something away, But if they are willing to pay a little bit of money, they get something in addition.
I love it. All right. That is very helpful. And
Good.
now we're almost done with the hour. And I want to talk about what you have coming up or what you'd like to share with the audience. So, what are you working on these days? I know you talked about it a little bit at the front, but it's been an hour, and I'll bet that those people probably don't remember. So, let's talk about it a little bit again.
Sure. There are two things that I focus on right now. So the first is the hot sheet. That's the newsletter I do on publishing industry news and developments. And it is a paid subscription. So a lot of the things I just talked about apply in some measure to the hot sheet. Although it has always been a paid service, I've never done it for free. And then the other thing that I do is a webinar series where I'm teaching on topics once a month, and then I have a guest come in and teach on some topic once a month. So, for instance, I've got Mark Leslie Lefebvre. Gosh, I hope I'm not butchering his name. He's currently working at Draft to Digital, and he's a fiction author, of course, in his own right. And he's going to be doing a course later in April about how to make money from your short fiction, something I know almost nothing about. So I'm really eager to get his insights on, because I know he earns a significant amount of money from doing, but like, is it Story Bundle? I think it's Story Bundle, like from having his work included in those sorts of anthologies. So I've always found that a pretty fascinating business model, which is really popular in self-publishing, but it's something that, you almost never see in traditional publishing except for those Best American anthologies.
Awesome. And if people wanted to get involved with one of those things, where would they go?
The best place to go is janefriedman.com. So that's the clearinghouse for both the online education that I offer, and there are also links to the hot sheet.
Awesome. All right. So, last thing. Well, two pieces of last thing. If you have any social media that they can find, then you feel free to pimp that too, or we can just talk about janefriedman.com. But people have now been driving or doing something else or taking a walk now for the past hour and being pleasantly entertained. But now this is the moment where I'm going to ask them all to focus back for a second while you deliver what you think is the best piece of advice that you would either give to somebody who was just starting, that wish you had heard when you were just starting. You can take it any way, but best piece of advice that you've ever been given. But basically what you want them to leave this podcast remembering. And then we'll say goodbye.
Okay. I would say think beyond the book. So think beyond the book in terms of the work you produce and how you're going to earn money. And you're going to have a much stronger career as a result.
Awesome. Any social media?
I'm easiest to find on Twitter at Jane Friedman, but you can find me on Facebook and Instagram too.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jane, for stopping by today. It was lovely.
My pleasure. Thank you, Russell.
So that was Jane Friedman. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I certainly did. If you did, go check out her book, The Business of Being a Writer, and check out janefriedman.com. And while you're on the interwebs, head on over to thecompletecreative.com for all of our epic blog posts, podcast archives, and a whole lot, including our free course on writing a great novel at thecompletecreative.com/novel. Please, last thing, please rate, subscribe, review, and tell 3 friends about us. It's the best way to help us grow and sustain this podcast. See you next time.